Talk shoes. Recorded live.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation or around the world. Once again, you are listening to the VMware Communities Roundtable Podcast. This is podcast number 580. My name is Eric Nilsson, and with me today, I have my co-host, Matt Lungeth. Today is Wednesday, November 10th, 2021. Matt, how you doing today?
Eric, I have to say, I'm just a tad bit sad. After almost 8 years of service, my very trusty steed that was my 2014 late model MacBook Pro has been put out to pasture.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. I mean, I'm sure you're going to get a new one and love those little chiclet keys that they've got on all those new Macs, and no ports, USB-Cs only. Did you go from lots of ports to a few ports now, or what's your strategy?
So the strategy was the replacement is the 16-inch MacBook Pro with the M1 Pro chip with 32 gig of RAM and a 1 terabyte SSD. It has arrived. I was lucky enough to get in early and on the announcements, and it's absolutely fantastic. So although I feel a little of that sadness, right, for such a trusty mount, as they say in the equestrian world. It's nice to see over to the transition over to the M1 chip. And just the initial takeaway from it is the battery life is absolutely incredible. But enough about all things Mac and MacBook Pro, sir. As always, those important questions. How are you? How is the weather out there in the West Coast? And what is the color of the bay?
Thanks a lot, Matt. The color of the bay here has been it's cloudy and foggy. We had a lot of fog running through the Bay Area the last few days. It's been wet. We've had more rain, so rain for the last couple of weeks now. It's been good for all the fire season. Everything is good. Now we got the old mountains sliding away because it's muddy and all the good things that Northern California always have. But color bay it's kind of windy, choppy, and gray. So it's choppy and cold. Feels like I'm in the Northeast up there in Boston, looking out over the sound. It's just cold and green. On the show today, it's going to be a fun show today. We have Chad Skipper, Director of Product Marketing for NSX. He works on some of the NSX stuff, and he's here today to talk to us about certifications, the AA rating we got for network detection and response from SE Labs. Chad, welcome to the show. I'd like to say hello and just hear your voice.
Well, good day, everyone. Thanks for having me, Eric, Matt, Corey. Yes, I'm the global security technologist here at VMware. And yes, today we're going to have some fun. We're going to be talking about the industry's first network detection and response test performed by SE Labs against the VMware NSX NDR solution. So great data here on testing our products against persistent and advanced threats that our customers are battling every single day. So I'm happy to be here. Thanks.
Excited to have you. Before we get to you, though, we'll drift over to Corey and say, hey, Corey, I know you've been doing some vExpert stuff. I assume it's 3 feet of snow in Utah by now, and you've been out skiing every day, and now you're going to come back and finally do a little bit of work. What's been happening with vExperts? What's going on in Utah?
Utah has just been rain. All of the snow melted off, and it's just been rainstorms. So 41 degrees yesterday afternoon, rain coming in, and it still stayed above 32. So, lots of rain. vExperts. So applications for the vExpert program for the 2022 awards are opening December 6th and closing January 14th. So that's enough time to get all of your content in from 2021. And we're going to have an announcement for the awards on February 18th. Now, December 2nd, we're also holding an exclusive vExpert webinar on protecting cloud applications with VM security. We're going to have that with Victor Monga, who runs the VMware vExpert security program, and two of his colleagues as well. And then we're also doing a call for content, and this is for the vExperts, right? Like I've got the email in there, so go read your mail. I just sent another one out yesterday on this. Call for content. For both the vExpert program and VMware multi-cloud. Now, what do I mean vExpert program? What I mean is in the email, it details that I'm looking for content on your personal and professional impact from the vExpert program, so we can share your stories, share your journey with the program out to the general broader community of VMware when we open the applications.
Sounds like you guys are going to be busy. Looking forward to coming to the holiday season. And the vExpert app is always one of those things that we get every year for the holiday season. So always fun to see everybody come in with what they've been doing all year. Yeah, that's good. All right. With that, Matt, any other news before we start down the path of networking and security with Chad?
I know that Corey and I are going to be guests on the Digital Workspace Tech Zone podcast on the first week of December. So if you're new to the vExpert program, if you're just a first-time listener or a potential first-time applicant to all things vExpert, and you want to learn more about the program itself and some of the sub-programs, specifically the EUC track within the vExpert award, listen in on I believe we're recording on 12/6 with Josue Negrano and whatnot. So lots of fine details over there about how to better your application. And in the meantime, please always reach out to your local vExpert Pro if you have questions about your application or the application process in general. With that, sir, let's jump right into all things NSX and NDR and this AAA certification that we received as of late.
Yep. So, Chad, we always start with the community podcast. Who are you? You know, how long have you had your career going? What's your career arc look like? Tell us a little about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, career arc. Let me. The foundation of my career started in the United States Air Force. So I was in the Air Force in the beginning in the early 90s through the mid 90s, and I was part of the Air Intelligence Agency as well as the Air Force Information Warfare Center. In that, we did a lot of defensive and offensive, types of capabilities. And it's funny, that's where I began to, sharpen my, childlike teeth, because I was very young at this time, right? Into, network security, endpoint security. This is before Windows 95. I remember Windows 95 coming out, right? So I'm sure we all do. And so, the Air Force was a great foundation. We actually developed the first intrusion detection system in the Air Force, right? So that was pretty interesting. From there, I left the Air Force. It was literally, do I want to stay in the Air Force, or do I want to make 4 times the money leaving the Air Force, right? Going in basically the same type of thing. So any case, left the Air Force, and I ended up going through a startup that got purchased by Symantec. So I spent some time at Symantec on the endpoint, the antivirus, where we were actually developing host-based intrusion detection systems at that time. From there, I was in San Antonio, Texas. Symantec says, "Hey, why don't you move out to California? We're shutting down the shop in San Antonio." And I was like, "No, I'm Texas born and bred, so I'm going to stay in Texas. I like the barbecue here in Texas much better than I do the barbecue in California." And so anyway, I ended up at Cisco for 9 years, right? And it's funny, I'm working with a lot of colleagues that I work with Cisco here at VMware. So the security industry is a small industry. We have a lot of great relationships, but that was firewall. That was, again, intrusion detection systems on the switches, on the routers, standalone, those types of things. And naturally, this is where, we still had, actual data centers inside of your organization. There was no such thing as cloud at this time, really. And so you had, a clear line of a perimeter, not like you do today. The perimeter is very porous, but from Cisco, I went to a small little startup on security event information management, SIM. But there I ended up at Dell, inside the offices of the CTO, where I was in charge of product security for all of the endpoints that we sold to all of our customers, 24 million endpoints, right? From there, I ended up at Silence, which is an endpoint security company. There I ran product testing, and that's what we're going to be talking about today, from an endpoint perspective, as well as competitive intelligence. That was bought by BlackBerry. Good exit there. And then I wanted to get back on the network side, so I through friends and relationships, found that Last Line was looking for some help. And so I joined Lastline, which is the network detection and response company that was acquired by VMware in June of 2020 last year. And so that's how I ended up here at VMware as the global security technologist, focusing on the NSX security portfolio, which is many things. But today we're going to be focused on a portion of that, which is the network detection and response capability. So I've had my career's been blessed both on the endpoint, network, cloud services, managed security services, and now I'm getting my feet wet into the virtualized space, right? So virtualization is vastly different, than physical. So some great opportunities ahead for the security industry, especially given the placement of where VMware is, especially within that hypervisor, the VNIC aspect. So, just a very high level of where I've been and what I've done, but it's been a great ride so far.
That's a great. So many things to unpack there, but a couple of comments is like I in the 1988, I think I worked on the with McDonnell Douglas on the ATF program, Advanced Tactical Fighter program, and they were still spinning up around security issues around flight simulation, that kind of stuff. And my boss was from the Air Force, right? It was a fun place. A lot of people in tech have come that route, right? You have come in through defense contractors of all kinds, whether it's in the military or adjacent to the military, and then learning tech and then end up in the industry, right? So it's kind of cool that to hear you tell that story, right? Yeah. At the same time, coming to VMware, what's your impressions of working at VMware so far?
It's been an excellent opportunity for me. It's very professional, and we have a singular focus, and that singular focus is the multi-cloud, right? And protecting our customers in our multi-cloud environment. Also, I come back to a lot of colleagues that I haven't worked with since my Cisco days, right? So that helps with those relationships. But what gets me most excited is the advantages that we have.
Matt, are you there?
I am here. I think we might have just lost Chad for a second.
Yeah, that's well. Hopefully, he'll join us back in a few minutes. I got to say, his career history has been one that I kind of like. I'm jealous of. And one of the things that we talked about before he came on the show was his Lightboard videos on the blog. And I'll do a shout out to the blog on this topic. They have a blog that they've written about the certification, the AAA rating on the for VMware products. So let me see if I can.
I think that the quickest way for anyone that is interested in reading through that particular comment is to go over to blogs.vmware.com/network virtualization. And you'll see right there at the top of the blog articles, the actual article is composed by Chad himself. And the title is VMware Achieves Industry First AAA Rating for Network Detection and Response from SE Labs. And it goes through and it details the entire process. And also some of the, as you had mentioned, the Lightboard videos is featured within the article of detailing through the process.
Yeah, that's right. And I got to say that one of the things I asked him was, how does he like VMware? Because he's talking about the fact that VMware shipped him that Lightboard environment that he puts in his home office in Texas, right? And then he's doing these Lightboard videos right out of his home and the technology. And one of the things that I recognize when I come to VMware is a yes company, right? Like VMware is a very yes company. And so you come here and you go, hey, could I get a Lightboard? And they go, yeah, sure, we'll give you a Lightboard. And so what Chad was talking to, and I see Chad has come back. All I did was when Chad, when I asked about joining VMware, what my experience is that VMware is a yes company. And then I mentioned that when you've got a Lightboard that you've done on the blog, we did a shout out to the blog, and you've got a Lightboard series there. And VMware is this company that when you join, they go, yes, we can do that. Oh, we can do this too. Yes, anything you want, we can get you, and we can do. I found when I came to VMware versus working at Sun, I've been here a lot of years now, but the difference from Sun and to coming to VMware is that VMware says yes almost to everything, right? And
So-
you have to choose what not to do.
So as I got disconnected here, right, for some reason, who knows why, the last thing I said is the yes is absolutely correct. It's metal, pedal to the metal, and I'll tell you when to brake. And they haven't told me to brake yet. So, so that's exactly where it is. Full gas, steering along. They'll tell me to brake. They'll tell me where the bumpers are, and it's just go after it, right? So it's been an excellent journey so far.
So when we talk about this network detection and response around security, why don't you take us a little, for guys that might not have lived in this space, what does that mean for people? And from an industry perspective, how is this developing?
Yeah. So give me some latitude as I go through this a little bit on the network side, naturally. And I want to take it from a moderate attack perspective, right? Okay. So the threat actors are trying to gain that initial access into your organization, right? And there are many ways in which I can do that. And there are technologies that can pick that up. I consider network to be the ground truth, right? So anything that is going over the network from a communications perspective is the ground truth. However, from an endpoint, once I infect it, I can modify that endpoint to fake out antivirus, fake out, syslog, logging, those types of things to basically evade that type of detection. So the threat actor is trying to gain that initial access. And there's two major ways in which they can gain that initial access. One is I'm going to try to get an end user to interact with something malicious, right? I'm going to send you something malicious, whether it's via email, an attachment, or it's a link in email that I click on and I go off and I see that on a website and I download something, right? So from a network detection and response, think of this as being able to intercept that network traffic and pull those payloads off of the wire. So I understand what type of artifacts that you're getting, right? And we call that a network sandbox. So our ability to take artifacts, PowerPoints, scripts, PowerShell scripts, Python scripts, .exes, archives, RARs, those things that are maliciously being shared, we have sensing technology that senses the network, and we can pull those payloads and we can inspect those in what we call our NSX sandbox. And that sandbox is a fully system emulated sandbox, meaning we emulate the CPU, the memory, and the OS, and we can interact with that malware to be able to determine if it's indeed malicious. So that's one way threat actors try to gain that initial access. And another major way is I'm going to exploit, right, some type of vulnerability inside of your organization. It might be a vulnerability in a workload, call it, Apache vulnerability, Oracle vulnerability, right? Something in your workload. I'm going to exploit that and try to gain access onto that workload. And that's exactly where network detection and response, again, has the ability to see those. And that really comes from the intrusion detection and intrusion prevention systems that we have here at VMware. And now, here's the thing. Once the threat actor gains that initial access, they are not usually too concerned on that initial beachhead. What they are wanting to do is evade detection, right? And begin to discover what is inside the network. So from that perspective, they might start doing, port scans. They might start enumerating the network to understand what type of applications are out there. Am I looking at an AD directory? Am I looking at a MySQL workload? What is it that I'm looking at, right? And once they begin to discover, this is where network traffic analysis really comes into play. And the reason I mentioned three of these technologies, the sandbox, the IDS, and now the network traffic analysis, that's what makes up our network detection and response capabilities. Now, the network traffic analysis, it is all about understanding and baselining the traffic within your multi-cloud environment. So east-west. Once a threat actor gets in, how do you have visibility into all of that traffic? And how do you create a baseline on that traffic in order for you to detect anomalies? Anomalies such as, hey, look, all of a sudden, this workload has laterally connected via remote desktop protocol, via PS exec, via something to another workload that has never happened before, right? So that is an anomaly. And we apply many forms of machine learning on top of this to really extract out those anomalies. As are they benign? Because not all anomalies are malicious, right? I mean, I can log in at 3:30 in the morning. It will pop up as an anomaly. Okay, great, it's an anomaly, but it's not necessarily malicious. And so this is the visibility that is needed in the industry from a network perspective. Our ability to see the ingress and the egress, right? The ingress of the threat actor and the communication egressing out of that, and detect that properly, as well as how that threat actor, now he's inside of your environment, how is he discovering? How is he enumerating, right? Is he doing any type of credential access? Has he done any remote exploitation of services, right? How is he moving laterally? And then lastly, have they taken any data and exfiltrated it, right? Because what we're seeing today is this double extortion strategy across our customers, where I will gain initial access and then I will move laterally and I might ransomware a device over here, right? But at the same time, I'm exfiltrating other data off of other devices. And it becomes this double extortion where I'm going to extort you for some type of money to get the encryption keys back so that you can unlock that data that I just ransomed. But I've also exfiltrated that data as well, and will begin to sell that on the back end. So you've got to, and this is what is great about the VMware NSX network detection response capabilities. Everything that I just described here, we have detection and sensing capabilities that can detect and then pull all of that together to provide a timeline of events that we've seen from threat actors, all the way from initial access to them discovering, moving laterally, collecting data, exfiltrating that data, and then planning ransomware within the organization. So that is at the various high level of network detection and response and network security. And naturally, segmentation comes with that, right? So segmentation is the core of segmenting your network, reducing that blast radius, and we have those capabilities as well as virtually patching vulnerabilities. But with segmentation, you still have common ports and protocols that you have to allow through in your organization. And so how do you end up being able to detect those malicious activities, even though that you have a segmentation? That's where our multi-hop technology and our ability to see broadly across the entire infrastructure helps us detect those types of malicious activities inside the organization as well. So I hope that helps, Eric, Matt. You have any questions? We can dive deeper into that, but that's where the network side of things come around.
Matt, do you want to go? I have something, but I'll let you.
I want to go into the actual benchmarking, and I want to talk about who SE Labs is, and I want to go into the qualification process around the rating. But
right.
just
that was exactly my question as well. Define the AA. It's a AAA rating, and what does that actually mean anyway? So yeah.
But before we get there, I do want to just as a general framework, what we see with these IDS and IPS products and next-gen AV or next-gen network monitoring, is that as a general overall theme, I think, as admins, the more that we monitor, the more that we need to consume as far as dashboards, and then being able to filter down to actionable intelligence, right? The more that we're in a position, Chad, I'm sure you can speak to this, that now we're monitoring literally from the wire up in many instances, and in both on-prem and cloud. And that puts us in a tremendous opportunity to detect these anomalies, but also potentially a lot of false positives. So how do we pare down and use things like AI and baselines to provide the operators and the SOCs of the world for these organizations into actionable intelligence?
Yeah,
right?
let's talk
how do we keep how do we turn the noise into actual actionable items.
Yeah. So let's talk about that let's talk about the AI and the machine learning and how we get down to that actionable, items, because, an anomaly, like I said earlier, is not necessarily malicious. Make sense? So what we do first, right? We use AI to build models that allow us to detect that malicious traffic. And for this, we have a two-step process. Now, in the first step, we apply unsupervised machine model, right, to all the traffic that we observe in the network. Now, this allows us to recognize those anomalies in traffic and distinguish them from normal behavior, right? But that's not enough, right? A lot of NTA or anomaly detectors, that's where they stop and say, hey, this is an anomaly. Now we want you as the administrator to go figure out if it was indeed benign or malicious. And that has been a significant challenge in the industry. And that's where you talk about alert fatigue, overload. There's so many different types of things. And now that's the
That's
first.
where the alert traffic gets turned off, right?
Exactly. Right. That's where it gets turned off, right? It's just too noisy. But we've applied but we know that's not enough, right? And again, we know that not every anomaly is also a threat. So in the second step, we apply a threat-centric supervised machine models to these anomalies. Now, these models allow us to identify true threats and those anomalies that are actually versus those anomalies that are actually not security relevant. And what this does, it reduces those false positives. Now, the way that we can do that is we leverage, right? Remember talking about the sandbox earlier, the NSX sandbox? We leverage the label behaviors and that network traffic that we get out of that sandbox. So when we see malware in that sandbox, right, we allow it to communicate with the threat actor, and we will take that and we will capture that, and that informs our machine learning. So what we do is that, based upon analyzing millions of samples every day, right? And then we use our deep security domain expertise to make sure that we're picking the right features and suitable algorithms. And this is where it comes down to people. We were talking about people earlier, Eric, inside of VMware. This is where it comes down to our PhDs, our data scientists that are actually very threat centric, right? And that's where they then are taking all of this telemetry and they're tuning, right, those machine learning models, and then updating those in the product as we go forward. So it is unsupervised to understand the anomalies, and then supervised machine learning models that we have applied on known bad network traffic and known bad malicious objects. And then that filters out all of those false positives to where now we actually have a true malicious anomaly that we can elevate, right, to the security operations center, to the VI admin, to the network security admin, whoever is using that product. Now we can elevate it, and we're very strong. And that's exactly what this test brought out, because in this test, they were using different types of anomaly traffic, right? They created a baseline for us. This is normal. This is what we're doing.
The test, Chad, I want to talk a little bit about who was doing the test. So if you can give us a little bit of background as far as why we chose, who SE Labs is, why we have chosen them as to qualify the product, and the testing procedure in general, right? We've talked about the nuts and bolts and how it's supposed to work, and now we've engaged this third party to verify the information. So how did we find them? Who are they? What's their background? And let's talk a little bit about the testing process.
Sure. So SE Labs has been around for many years. In fact, it's led by Simon Edwards, who's been in the security testing for over 20 years. He started out at Dennis Technologies Labs many years ago, and now he's at SE Labs. They are located in London, outside of the United States. So they're in London. I've worked with that team for many years myself. They do endpoint and network protection, detection, and response testing. They have tested next generation firewalls, intrusion detection, and cloud security services, including email, web security, CASB, those types of technologies. They've been testing for several years. They also have Global 500 clients who ask them to test their products. Hey, look, we've set up these products in this way. We want you to do some form of penetration testing to make sure that we've got our products right. They've also worked with Global 1000 companies saying, hey, I have vendor A and vendor B, and I don't know which one to go for, but can you tell me what their efficacy is if you went and test them inside of your organization? So those are areas that they've done. They've worked with analysts, naturally, and they're part of a consortium. It's called Anti-Malware Standards Testing Organization. It's AMTSO. And in fact, I helped write those standards when I was at Silence as a vendor perspective. So these are standards that have been adopted and signed off by vendors and testers alone, so that we all know how they are performing the tests, right? And we get all the telemetry back in which they tested against us. And then we work with them through the writing of the report based upon what we actually tested. Now, they have a team of professional red teamers, is what I will call them, right? And this is not automated by any means, right? What they have done is they will go set up a real live network, right? They will mimic live traffic, web traffic, Active Directory traffic, DNS traffic, these types of things to mimic a real world environment. And then from there, they will deploy, obfuscate sometimes the tools in which they have, but common tools that are out there, common red teaming tools, common advanced persistent threats, ones that have been identified. They actually use those and then deploy them just like a threat actor would, right? All right, I'm going to actually send a phishing email off to this user. Okay, now I'm going to act as that user. I'm going to go to the email. Hey, look, this is the link. I'm going to click on it. Oh, yes, yes, install. Yes, enable those macros. Yes, do that, just like any user would. Once it's compromised, then they swivel chair, right? And now I'm the threat actor. Now I have that access. I'm going to do exactly what the threat actor does. I'm going to begin, like I said, now that I have that beachhead, I am going to deploy extra tools onto that system, remote access Trojan as an example, right? That allows me to do command and control. I'm going to send those command and controls as the threat actor would. I am going to discover the network as a threat actor would.
Establish the beachhead, right?
Establish the beachhead. And then once it's established, this is another thing. Now that I'm on there, I can scrape the cache of their web browsers, get their username and passwords. Now I might be able to log in via RDP to another device laterally. And can you see that? Can you see that anomalous RDP connection, right? So they're doing all of these anomalous things inside the network, whether it is a PS exec, whether it's remote task scheduling, whether it is moving laterally via remote desktop protocol, and then moving things like Mimikatz, right? They will obfuscate Mimikatz. Mimikatz is a hacking tool that allows you to basically get usernames and passwords, credentials, right, on the system itself. So they deploy and obfuscate those. Can you detect that? So that is, they are doing, this real live people in seats, both threat actors and victims inside a controlled environment, but inside that environment. And then what happens is you overlay your tools, right? Do you have endpoint technology? Okay, do you have network technology? You have IPS, is IPS detecting the command and control? The sandbox, is it seeing and being able to take those payloads that are being shared between the users and detonate those in a sandbox to determine if those are malicious? So depending on what they're testing, they will put the tools in the right place. And then from there, look at the telemetry. Did you detect, right? So they have a set of these. We actually did 4 different types of tests. And
I was
each
just
one
going
of
to
those,
comment on that, right? They have this myriad of toolboxes, but they do follow a prescriptive method, if you will,
that's
based on what has been some I'm assuming industry analysis to figure out what, in some instances, were nation state actors that have put together this recipe, if you will, this prescription of these certain tool sets of how they were able to do certain breaches. And then use that as the baselines to establish, hey, were we able to notify, one, detect, and then two, properly notify of that this malicious activity was going on the wire.
And we wanted, since this was the first of its kind, the first network detection response test of its kind in the industry, right? There's been firewall tests, right? There's been intrusion detection tests separately. There's been sandboxing testing, right? But from our NDR correlation capability, what we're doing is we're taking all of those, right? The firewall, the IDS, the sandbox, the NTA, and we're correlating all of those events together to provide you a kill chain, right? A threat mapping, right? A blueprint of everything that we've seen that threat actor do. So you're not having to comb through all your IDS events, all your sandbox events, all your NTA events. We're correlating those together to provide you, okay, threat actor did this at this time, then he did this, then he did this, then he did this, right? A timeline across the way. And we wanted to make sure that we had a breadth of tests against us. So we went with 4 advanced persistent threats that we wanted them to test against us. One of them was FIN7 Carbonac. That threat group mainly targeted banks. And we, finance industry, they are under attack all the time. Treasure trove of PII in there, credit cards, those types of things. But we also,
how many times have we heard about ransomware attacks across 36 months with?
Exactly. And we also wanted to really understand and be tested against an advanced persistent nation state. So oil rig APT generated from Iran. And they really focused in the UAE, but they were targeting finance, government, energy, chemical, and telecommunications, right? So we wanted to make sure that we had that type of nation state aspect as well. APT3, that's China-based, and they really targeted U.S. victims, a group of a lot of U.S. victims, political organizations in Hong Kong, those types of things. And then last, we've all heard of SolarWinds, the SolarWinds vulnerability, what happened there, right? The attack chain that happened there. But here, this is a Russian group that's targeting government networks, right? And research institutes, and APT29 has been attributed to the SolarWinds supply chain attack that happened earlier in the year. And so that gave us a breadth of different types of threat actors and advanced persistent threats that we wanted tested against our NDR system, right? And so they set it up in initial access, right? Okay, did we detect the initial access check? We did not have any endpoint telemetry in this test. So this was pure 100% network, right? So we did not have anything on the endpoint. We wanted to see what we could see everything on the network. We detected all of the initial access capabilities, the discovery aspects. The lateral movement was the second part of the test. Discovery and lateral movement was the second part of the test, right? And then impact, exfiltration, and impact was the third part of the test, right? I'm going to plant ransomware plus exfiltrate data. And so we were able to detect all the malicious payloads, all the network telemetry, as well as all the exfiltration events coming out, exfiltration events that they deployed within the organization. So very outstanding work on our engineering effort, all of our cybersecurity experts in building this product. But also on top of that, they did test for what you called earlier false positives, right? So they did actually deploy, files, right? Artifacts, normal artifacts that we had to analyze. And it was, okay, this is a benign. I want to see if you falsely report that
what's that one time a month SMB traffic that's going across that we haven't seen before?
That's correct. So they did other types of network traffic that was not malicious. It was outside the scope of the threat actor, but they put that in there and we did not detect on those because again, it didn't fit the model of a malicious activity with our supervised machine learning on top of that. So 0 false positives, and we detected all the network telemetry, right? Both north, south, east, west, egress, ingress, east, west, right? As well as the payloads that were not just being ingressed into the organization, but the sandbox is actually part of the hypervisor, part of the VNet, right? So in that case, if we're sharing in between, workloads or VDIs, we have the ability to inspect those payloads within the organization as well. Because that's what threat actors do. Once they get in and they compromise an endpoint and they move laterally, they're going to move their tools laterally onto that secondary patient 1, patient 2, patient 3, in order to get the data out in which they want. You just don't land there and just top around. You've got to be able to have some type of, as an example, remote access Trojan on there to exfiltrate data and send it out the way.
And because we're at the VNIC level, right? If we think of east-west traffic sometimes as we're moving from on-prem to cloud potentially, we're also having insights into that, right? As far as this, we're not necessarily even looking at it where it's host to host within a given DC, right? We're monitoring it now across SDDC regions, both
multiple
on-prem,
hops, across multiple hops. Yes. And not only that, not only in the virtualized aspect of it, we have the same solution that can be deployed outside of the VMware NSX virtualization. So, think of NDR as part as the VNet virtualized across multiple hops. You no longer have to tap. You no longer have to span ports, right? You no longer have to hairpin. But not everybody is virtualized, and they still want this same type of visibility, right? Efficacy and detection of these threats. So we also can deploy it on premise with sensors and via span, tap port, those types of things as well. So we can be outside the virtualized and inside the virtualized as well. So those same type of telemetry and similar capabilities are both for multi-cloud environments, virtualized, as well as, on-premise.
So if I wanted to feed top of rack data and do port mirroring into this, I could.
We have a solution, absolutely. Port mirroring. In fact, you can do port mirroring outside or port mirroring within NSX as well. Yep, sure can.
So that's a good segue into, like we've talked about testing. Let's talk about what VMware offers. We purchased Last Line, acquired in July 2020. I'm assuming this is a SaaS cloud environment, but it's also, we embedded some of the technology into NSX. What does our solution look like if people are interested in, deploying this?
Well, I can show you a quick little view if we want to do that right quick on what this looks like and show you the oil rig, information if that's what we want to do. It's easier shown than it is anything else, right?
If you want to share your desktop, we can do that, but you're going to have to talk through it audio because most of the people listening are listening.
Okay, then we'll just talk right through it, right? So that's not a problem. So what is it that we're delivering, right? So we are delivering what we call naturally a network detection and response system. And in that network detection response, we have three major technologies that we're deploying across that. Again, the first one is the fully system emulated sandbox, right? So what we mean by full system emulation is we emulate the OS, the CPU, and the memory. And we're the only ones in the industry that does that. And the reason that we have to do that is because threat actors can evade OS virtualized sandbox in many, many different ways. They can put a timeout in their execution. So once execution, I can put a timeout there and it might time out the OS, virtualized OS, and they just send it across. But it allows us to interact with the malware and elicit every behavior, whether it is a CPU behavior, a memory behavior, or an OS behavior. So that's number one. So think about all the artifacts coming in and moving laterally within your organization. The second one is intrusion detection, intrusion prevention system, right? This is signature-based and behavioral-based. So think about command and control. I see a command and control session established right? Or think about a remote service vulnerability or exploitation. I'm exploiting Tomcat. I'm exploiting Apache struts, those types of things. So we have an IDS that is basically sniffing packets, right? Deep packet inspection. And it will take that deep packet and do deep packet inspection on those packets that are coming across, flows, those types of things. And so then we also have network traffic analysis. And that is very important because that's really focused on baselining, right? All your internal traffic, like we were discussing earlier, in order to determine those anomalies and then apply, other supervised machine learning on top of those to get the real threats out of those. And what happens is we have 100% visibility across traffic entering and exiting your organization, as well as traffic moving laterally in your organization, and all those payloads being shared. And we can walk them and connect the dots across the MITRE ATT&CK framework. And that's what's really powerful. Is, hey, look, we saw this initial access. It could be a remote exploit, or it can be some type of phishing. From there, the threat actor began to establish communications via command and control. That would be our IDS. So the first one, phishing email or some type of payload, that's the sandbox. And then we connect the dots. Well, they try to do communication. Here's the command and control traffic that we saw, and that's IDS. Well, what happened next? Well, now that they're in, they might have pushed down some more malware. Sandbox is going to see that. And now that they're in, what are they doing inside of your network? Well, I begin to discover. I do credential access, I move laterally. That's where NTA comes in. And we have the ability to connect all of that together in what we call campaigns inside of our product, so that we really provide that SOC analyst great insight into that threat actor and what stage that threat actor is inside of his organization. So that's at a high level, Eric.
Is that last line itself?
That is last line. Yep, that is the last line acquisition. By VMware, absolutely.
Chad, from a workloads perspective, so like a vSphere's topology, if you will, this sandbox environment, would you consider that its own workload domain? I mean, do we need to provision about that and think about resourcing to allocate?
Great question. It is part of guest introspection, right? Or VNIC. And what we do is on every VNIC, you have guest introspection, and we can see through the encryption payload, right? And what we're doing on the VNIC, on the guest introspection, is statically analyzing that artifact, right? And what I mean by static is you got signatures, we have hashes, we understand how things behave. And if it's something we've never seen before, or we can't say, no, this is good, right? Then we will push that up via our cloud connector to the hosted portion of the sandbox in the cloud, where then it can dynamically execute this in a sandbox and really interact with it to determine if it's indeed malicious or benign. So that all of that processing power is done in the cloud via the VMware cloud, right, where we're going to host the dynamic execution of those payloads in the sandbox in the cloud. But everything else on that VNIC via guest introspection is static analysis.
Do we offer it does, and I would say for customers that are looking at this product that may be in air-gapped environments, do we offer a fully on-premises solution as of yet?
Yes, that is a great question. We have a full on-premise solution of network detection and response, right? Everything can be on-premise. Now, full air-gapped, that's where you get into some situations, right? Because, if you're completely air-gapped, then it's what we used to call sneaker net, right? You would have to do the updates, right? And download the updates and then go into your
any
SOC,
type of signature and all
and then update those as time goes. And you can't really share in telemetry, right? Because it's all, but we do have air gap, right? But that's one of those things. When you have an air gap, you're going to miss out on some of those updates unless you sneak. In the Air Force, we used to call it sneaker net because of top secret SCI clearances, going into different types of things to update your security plays. So
2 different terminals on the desk, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm listening to all this, and it's like it's crazy, but I get the idea behind it because I look at like the issues that Supermicro had a few years ago, where there was malicious stuff in the chips themselves with the hardware, right? And so the only way you were going to find that is by looking at the network traffic, right? Because if you look at the OS, if you look at anything above those layers, you're not going to see it. You're going to the chip itself, the network chip itself, had the ability to open up and let people in. And I just another fun story is that I started doing helium mining, right? And helium is like a long Wi-Fi, a network that you can set up in the Bay Area, and then they mine for Bitcoin, kind of helium coin.
Mhm.
But the point is that in order to do this, they send you a box, right? And it's just a cute little box. It looks like it has a Raspberry Pi in it. You don't know what it has in it. And then they require you to open up one port and then put this on your network, right? Now, I don't know what that thing is doing, right? I'm plugging that in because I want to be part of the kind of helium network and, mine and get coins and a bit, wallet and all that fun stuff. But the reality is this thing could be doing anything, and you don't know what that hardware is doing, right? You don't know what's in this little tiny box. And the box is literally the size of Raspberry Pi, but it's on my network and I put it on there, and, I just trust that it's not going to do anything malicious. But really, when you're adding hardware, you don't know what's in that hardware, right? And the only way to really figure this out is by having some kind of network detection that's looking at things going, is there malicious patterns happening that this thing is doing? Right.
Eric,
Or
as you're
even-
telling
or-
this story, I'm watching Chad's heart rate just instantly going up, that you're putting a third-party device that you have absolutely no idea what it actually does on your
That's
network.
exactly where I was going with it. And then when he said open a port, I'm like, oh, wait, open a
Exactly.
port?
Right.
It's just a port. Just go ahead and open it, right? It's like opening a window in your house. It's just a window, right?
Right. Exactly. Right. So to a large degree, like I'm sitting around, hey, if I get another one of these mining devices, I go up to my VMware office, I could hook that guy into the network. I could get more helium coin, right? Like, and you look at just what can be done in these small hardware devices. And granted, I did have to open up a port, so I get that you wouldn't do that at VMware right there. That they obviously wouldn't do that, but people do weird things, and things can show up in hardware that you have no idea even exist at the hardware layer.
Yeah.
So last line, you can license that from VMware. I assume we're still selling it. We bought the company, brought them in. I'm looking at the last line website. Is there a tie-in between NSX when I'm purchasing an NSXT license? Is this like an add-on bundle?
So So it's called, for the NSXT, it's called the Advanced Threat Prevention Bundle, ATP. Right. So all we talked about today, and that is the ability of it integrated, right, into the hypervisor, those types of things. That is the NSX ATP, Advanced Threat Prevention, right? For the standalone, right, motion outside of the hypervisor, that is our NSX Network Detection Response, right? So there is a SKU for NSX NDR, and then naturally there's the add-on, the ATP, Advanced Threat Prevention capabilities for the virtualized NSX. Does that help, Eric?
Yeah, that does. That's right. Just want to point people in the right direction if they want to learn about this and look at it and start worrying about it. Right. So cool, Matt.
But it's all NDR. It's all the same, right? I mean, it's the same. Just depending on it's the placement of it. You want it in the VNIC, in the virtualized part of the hypervisor, or do you want it as a standalone motion, protecting your traditional architecture?
Right. Matt, we're coming up. We have, I think, 5 minutes left. Any other questions for Chad?
One final point over to Chad, and one of the things that we didn't touch on was, and admittedly so because I think it was outside of the scope of the testing, was endpoint protection. And obviously, VMware having multiple products and their security portfolio. And I would say, and without going down the whole entire NDA route and whatnot, but I would say that is there any type of integration between or coming possibly between NDR and Carbon Black portfolio?
Absolutely. So we have a great product in Carbon Black Endpoint Detection and Response, or Carbon Black Workload, right? And in the future, you're going to see probably more testing along the front of us together, better together. Probably, the audience has heard of XDR, or what they call extended detection and response. And that is what the market is coining out there. There's many definitions for it, but I can tell you this. We are working closely with Carbon Black on the EDR side and the NDR side on working together on correlating the telemetry. Because there are things that we know that they don't know because we're on the network, and vice versa, they're on the endpoint. And we are working on correlating that telemetry. As an example, just give you a quick example because I know we have a few minutes later. If an artifact ends up on Carbon Black, right, and they don't know what it is, they can share it with us, and we can dynamically execute it inside of our sandbox, and then we can report down, is it bad or good, right? If we have IOCs that we're seeing somewhere else in the network, indicators of compromise, right? We can share back those down to Carbon Black, and they can use those IOCs within themselves, right? So those are just a very
it's just another point of endpoint analysis, right? Or
another point analysis. And there's a lot of, and it doesn't stop there, right? We've got web application firewall that we can get telemetry from. We got NSX intelligence we can get telemetry from. We've got edge intelligence. We've got
well, we could pull
Verni,
in from Velo Cloud, right?
Velo Cloud, Mesh 7, API security, all these types of things. That's the vision is, we have so much telemetry into the areas that we are, our goal, one of our goals is to really provide that high level with the substance behind it, but all that telemetry working together is just going to provide more visibility. And from that visibility, you'll be able to protect more. I always say, if you can't see it, you can't protect it. And that's exactly where we are. We're able to see these things so that we can protect our customers against advanced threat actors.
Sounds like a tremendous product and a tremendous future. Chad, one of the things that we always ask our guests is for, if you have it and care to share, for those that would like to follow along on social media. So do you have a social media presence on either Twitter or LinkedIn? And if so, would you mind sharing that with our listeners?
Absolutely. It's Twitter is at Chad Skipper. At Chad Skipper's Twitter. And it's
Skipper,
Chad
Skipper.
Skipper, right? And it's Chad Skipper on LinkedIn.
Excellent.
So you can reach out to me LinkedIn, on Twitter. Happy to do it. Happy to speak to you.
And we've seen, again, the blog article in question that we talked about at the top of the hour over at blogs.vmware.com/network virtualization. And you can see as Chad as being the published author for this right there at the top of the list of recent articles.
And with that, Matt, we'll transition to the V Barbecue Report because you guys have made it to the end.
This is going to get hot and contentious because we have a native Texan, I believe.
Yeah,
there's so much to dissect here.
I'm a Central California rub kind of barbecue kind of guy, but Chad, we always ask our guests, like, you're in Texas. What's your favorite barbecue, or do you have anything cool that you barbecue during the summer months? Give us some barbecue.
Smoked brisket.
There you go.
Smoked brisket. Right.
All those Texas people like smoked brisket.
Even quarrel with that. I mean, that's a solid response all year long.
You have a smoker outside. You rub it down, and you don't cut the fat off of the brisket at all. You leave the fat on, right, and smoke it at 225 to 250 degrees. Until it's right at your, some people like it medium rare, well done, right where you want it. But all that fat you leave on there adds to the taste. You can always cut the fat off when you go to eat it, but smoked brisket and smoked sausage.
Right. There you go. That sounds good. Sounds like you know what you're doing. You've done Texas proud there. Tony Foster, I know you're on the call. You've been patient. I know you did some barbecue as well. So why don't you tell us what that is?
Yeah. So this week, and I actually did it twice. It turned out so well. I did barbecued pears.
Barbecued pears.
So I actually split I split them in half. And I know you're not a huge fan of boats on the grill, but because of the type of pear I was using, I had to do both to start them in. bit of cinnamon, a bit of sugar, a bit of brandy, and I started them in a boat and cooked them for a bit. Then took them out and flipped them over and actually seared them on the grill, and let them finish cooking the rest of the way on the grill. They were absolutely phenomenal. Nice little bit of caramelization and everything. Could not beat it.
There you go. That's good to know that you can grill your desserts. You can grill your vegetables, you can grill your meat, and you can grill your fruit and vegetables and make a dessert. A little whipped cream on that. That sounds great. And we're at the top of the hour. Thanks a lot, Chad Skipper, for being with us. We learned a lot. I learned a lot. Great to hear from you. Keep up the good work and enjoy the rest of your day.
Appreciate it, team. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Tony. Appreciate your time. Really do.
And with that, we're going to hit the big stop button now. We'll see you again next week.